One of the great libels levelled against Marie Antoinette, the ill-fated Queen of France, was her indifference to the poor and hungry. It was summed up in a quote, famous of course, which she was supposed to make when told the poor had no bread to eat. Then let them eat cake, she's alleged to have retorted. Historians are convinced she never said this, but it does sum up the attitude of the court at Versailles on the eve of the French Revolution. Confronted by hungry mouths, they were indifferent and untouched by the plight of the poor. This week, a report was delivered on the plight of children in food poverty in Britain today. There are 4.2 million children living in Britain today. About 30% of children. In a class of 30, that's 9 children. And we know that many working families depend on food banks and cheap processed food to make ends meet. The long-term consequences of this for children's health is catastrophic. And this week, the government moved to avert this unfolding disaster among young people by increasing the entitlement to free school meals. It's terrible to think that in our country today, children still go hungry and experience the dire effects of food poverty and bad diets. Hunger lies at the heart of the gospel today as Jesus is confronted with the needs of the 5,000 who are like sheep without a shepherd, and our Lord ministers and cares for them. But the disciples, overwhelmed by the sheer task of feeding them, begs Jesus to send them away. But Jesus doesn't do that. Instead, our Lord feeds them with the meagre meal of 5 loaves and 2 fish. And that's a reminder to us of the importance of the little offerings we have when we give them to God. God can make something quite extraordinary out of them. This miracle depended on the 5 loaves and 2 fish. And it reminds each of us that the small things that we do in our lives, that God can make something extraordinary and wonderful with them. Perhaps this gospel passage also places before us this afternoon our duty and our responsibility to the poor. The disciples despaired at the impossibility of the task before them, and they wanted to give up. And sometimes so do we. And have we, as a society, given up trying to solve the problem of poverty, inequality, and social injustice? But there are many wonderful examples of those who have not given up, of those who refuse to despair. Look at the success of parish food banks, of breakfast clubs, lunch clubs, the work of the St Vincent de Paul Society, Skiaf, Mary's Meals, and much more besides. As Catholics, we know that at the altar, the simple bread that we break is blessed with the fullness of God Himself. But that's also true of our lives as well. When we share the bread of our lives with our brothers and sisters, showing them our care and love, then God is present, working through us, so that the little we have is transformed, just as the loaves and fish were transformed, to nourish and feed the multitude.